I have always been interested in women and women's issues. It's before I became a boundaries coach, I actually coached men and women. It's not that I wouldn't coach a man, but I tend to attract women. And then in the last couple years, I realized I really want to focus on professional women who say yes when they really want to say no and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on others. Because that was me. I was a professional woman and I was still working at Yale when I learned to build healthy boundaries. And I saw this ripple effect of me building boundaries on the rest of my team. And I was like, wait a minute, like none of the rest of these people are in recovery. What's happening here?
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we are joined by Barb Nangle. She is the founder and boundaries coach of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. She's been in business for the last 7 years. Welcome to the show, Barb.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. 7 years is not a short amount of time. And so I always love diving into the origin story, the lore. And so, yeah, let's start off here. Like, what was the moment when you realized you wanted to become a coach and, more importantly, start a business out of it?
I think it was in March of 2018, and it happened through a series of serendipitous events that I had worked at Yale University for 19 years and I got laid off, and I found my way into the world of startups and innovation and entrepreneurship in New Haven and at Yale. And it just came to me that I wanted to start my own business. It was something I had in the back of my mind my whole life, but honestly never thought I would do. And I never knew what it would be. But I had a colleague who I'd been volunteering with. He worked at the time it was called the Center for Innovative, or now it's called the Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. And he was like, tell me why you don't have your own coaching and consulting business, Barb, because that's what you do. And I was like, not the first time I've had this idea, but I had actually let it go a few years before, Kevin. So a huge part of my story is that 10 years ago, when I was 52 years old, I hit what I call a codependent bottom, and I landed in 12-step recovery for codependence, and it utterly transformed my life. So just briefly, codependent people are typically those who are so focused on other people that they neglect themselves. The typical codependent is in a relationship with an addict or an alcoholic. And I learned, among many other tools and skills in recovery, to build healthy boundaries. And they're essentially the antidote to codependence. So when I first started coaching, I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. I didn't know you needed a niche and all that. So I just started kind of coaching. And I thought I wanted to work with people in 12-step recovery who were entrepreneurs, because I knew that these two groups of people were like my people. And it just didn't really work out because, like, I'm not a business coach, and some people don't want people to know they're in 12-step recovery. And so when I started realizing I needed a niche, it just made sense for me to be a boundaries coach, because I was very good at helping people build boundaries. They had been utterly transformative for me, and they permeate every area of your life. So it's a starting point for people, but I can really help people with just about any kind of issue, no matter what realm of their life.
You said something really interesting. You came to a realization where you had to kind of niche down. And so how did you decide who you want to help? Who do you help? And what kind of problems do you help?
Yeah, so that has been a process. So because my podcast is geared toward people in 12-step recovery, I attracted a lot of people in 12-step recovery. And I have always been interested in women and women's issues. It's before I became a boundaries coach, I actually coached men and women. It's not that I wouldn't coach a man, but I tend to attract women. And then in the last couple years, I realized I really want to focus on professional women who say yes when they really want to say no, and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on others. Because that was me. I was a professional woman, and I was still working at Yale when I learned to build healthy boundaries. And I saw this ripple effect of me building boundaries on the rest of my team. And I was like, wait a minute, like none of the rest of these people are in recovery. What's happening here? And I realized we can't control other people, but we can influence them. And so when I change the dynamics of my interactions, everything around me changes and it impacts the other people as well. And so I really want that for other women. On top of that, I'm actually a sociologist by training. I have a master's in sociology. The reason I took the job at Yale, I worked as a program coordinator for urban education programs, primarily college access programs. And that was because graduate school taught me that I wanted my mission to be level the playing field. And when I got into recovery, that didn't go away. It was kind of like it went to the side, and healing people through the recovery that happens in your life through boundaries really took precedence. And then the last couple years, I've realized those two missions are aligned, because women are not going to make inroads into the social structures of society when they keep saying yes to things they don't want to do and when they keep neglecting themselves. And so I, as a sociologist, am interested in changing the social structures, but I also know that it's the interactions we have at the individual level that weaken and disrupt those social structures. So I'm really interested. Of course, I want to work individually with women, but I'm also a professional speaker. And so I'm also interested in working with organizations that serve or are comprised of professional women. Because, when we have a whole group of people that have been through a training on boundaries, at minimum, we have a common vocabulary, and people start talking about and recognizing and honoring boundaries in ways that they don't. And people can then give from the overflow rather than from an empty cup, because they learn to set limits with themselves, with other people, and to stop overgiving.
And I'm so curious, for the professional women that you do work with, what are kind of the symptoms that they're kind of going through? Is it kind of like enabling? Is it like over functioning? Like, what are some common things or things
So
that you see?
those are two really common ones. I will say, like, one thing pretty much, I would say 95% of the clients I have in common is they've all been on this personal growth journey for a very long time. They know all the things, they just can't make it happen. And I think that happens with a lot of coaches, is that people hire a coach because they want to help themselves follow through on the stuff that they know. So let's start with that. So many of them are either were married to, or have adult children who have mental health and or substance use issues. Some of the women themselves have those. Usually they're not actively in addiction, they're in some kind of recovery. Though it's not the case that everybody has someone that's in addiction, but they all grew up in some kind of dysfunction. And most of them really look like they have it together on the outside. And meanwhile, they're dying inside, or they're falling apart inside. Like, this was me, except for I kind of didn't know that I was dying inside. I drank abusively until I was in my early 40s. I smoked bales of weed. I lied, but I thought I was an honest person. So I definitely looked like I had it together on the outside. And meanwhile, I was doing all these coping mechanisms that were unhealthy. So there's those behaviors. So the enabling. So there's quite a number of mine have financial enabling. So they're supporting people who are perfectly capable of supporting themselves financially. They over volunteer. They stay super late at work. They're the go-to person on the team. They pick up the slack for people around them. They're exhausted all the time, even though they may engage in what they think of as self-care behaviors, like maybe they get massages on a regular basis, but they're not doing the day-to-day things that energize them. So a huge part of boundaries coaching is learning how to take really good care of yourself. What fuels you? So I help people figure out, like, what is draining you, and let's plug those drains. And then what fuels you, and let's create more of those things.
That's really interesting, because I think a lot of coaches in this space, they talk about what drains you, but they don't really ever talk about the other side of the coin of what energizes you. Do you notice any trends with any trends with or sorry, not trends, but patterns, I guess, of energizing activities?
So nature is a big one. Meditation, yoga, some kind of like physical exercise. And then for different people, it's like, what hobbies do you have? Many people have some kind of creative outlet, but they don't give themselves the time to engage in
Mm.
it, even though it's super energizing and they love doing it because it feels indulgent and it somehow feels selfish, to pursue those activities when there's people suffering in the world, as if somehow them, taking a poetry class is going to detract from the healing of the world when it would actually contribute to the healing of the world. For me personally, I call it conscious contact with my higher power. So that includes prayer, meditation, journaling. I grew up agnostic. And then when I was 37 or so, I read the book Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And it caused me to believe in my own conception of God. And then about 15 years later, I got into 12-step recovery. And by then, I really identified as a pretty spiritual person. But 12-step recovery just literally just exploded my spirituality and helped me create a relationship with my higher power. I happen to call my higher power God. Not everybody does. And it's my belief in what that means. It's not anybody else's conception. And I now have a relationship that's ongoing throughout the day. And I hand things over and I ask for guidance in ways that I didn't. I also, one thing that I do to refuel me is I love the Hallmark Channel and I love especially the Christmas movies. So I lay down on the couch and I watch a Hallmark Christmas movie. And, when I have to tell you, Kevin, I call myself a formerly closeted Hallmark fan because when I started really enjoying Hallmark, I didn't want people to know because I was like, oh, they're going to think it's sappy. Well, here's the thing, it is sappy. And I like to give this is a good snapshot of my life before recovery and after. Before recovery, I watched CSI, Criminal Minds, Law and Order, sitting on the edge of my seat, heart pounding. And now I lay down and I watch the Hallmark Channel and I have a smile on my face the whole time. And I like that there's a happy ending. I liked that there is a predictable outcome. I like that I am smiling almost the entire time that I'm watching. So, like, that is a very individual thing, but some of the other things I've mentioned are really common.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important too.
Mhm.
A lot of things like I've heard a lot about that too, like the connection to a higher power through 12 step a lot.
Mhm.
Through like yeah. But I do want to switch over to something too. It's like back to the coaching business. Okay,
Mhm.
so you're helping these professional women.
Mhm.
And so let's talk about the marketing for your business.
Mhm.
How do people kind of find you? What kind of marketing are you trying right now?
Yeah, primarily my podcast. So my podcast is called Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. I started it immediately when I started my business, but it never occurred to me that it would have anything to do with my business. For me, it was about carrying the message of recovery to those who still suffer. So that's the number one way that I get clients. Google is starting to pick up from that. I also use social media, and then I have an email list, which is around 1,000 people. And then I do a lot of networking. I network with especially women entrepreneurs that empower women, and I pitch for speaking engagements. And, I seek to provide speaking engagements to professional women and their audiences, but I will speak to, any gender audience. For example, I spoke at the Yale Working Women's Network in the spring, and then I spoke at the Connecticut Bar Association, had a wellness event. And there was, women obviously at the Yale event, and then men and women at the Bar Association event.
So that's really interesting. So it sounds like you're doing a bit of speaking, you're doing some social media, and obviously your podcast. And okay, so these women, they find out about you. Let's say they want to start working with you. One of the things that I love to hear are the different coaching modalities and business models of what's
Mhm.
working for coaches at different
Mhm.
stages. And so, what kind of coaching modalities do you like one on one, group coaching? I would love to kind of hear if you're open to talking about that as well.
Yeah, my bread and butter is my private 12-week coaching program. It's called Unshakable You, the Fragmented to Whole method. And I essentially created a multimedia curriculum. And the way that it happened is that when I basically learned to build boundaries as a byproduct of 12-step recovery, it wasn't like somebody sat me down and was like, here, let's build boundaries. And once I got a handle on them, I'm like, these boundaries are amazing. So I started reading about them, and everything I read was just words. And I have found that I'm a very visual person. So I would draw these visual images that for me depicted this notion of a boundary. And those drawings turned into handouts, which turned into a workbook, which is the spine of my boundaries coaching program. So I've also created PowerPoint presentations, often including those. And then I have podcasts and articles that I've written. So I work, one-on-one with the person, and we do it like the bulk of our time together is talking with them about their issues, their relationships, their situations, and etc. And then they go through the curriculum, and when they're done with all that other stuff, then they go to the workbook and they do the weekly training exercises. So that's where they're taking everything that they've learned from our conversations, the PowerPoint, the podcasts, and the articles, and apply it to their life, their situations, their issues, and their relationships, so that they're applying what they're learning. So between all of the curriculum and the work with me, it's the thing that gets people to be able to do the things they've never been able to do before.
Yeah, I'm also curious for that 12-week program that you have. So they go into the program, like what are the transformations when they come out of the 12-week program too? Like what are some of the transformations you notice?
Yeah, I think a really important one for many of them is an emotional transformation. The thing that stops people, Kevin, from setting boundaries or from following through on them is their emotions. And typically it's guilt and shame or fear of abandonment or rejection or judgment from other people. And so I do a lot of emotional work with people to learn how to some things they can do to prevent that stuff from happening, but a lot of it is actually allowing yourself to feel the feelings and understand like you're not going to die, and you get to consider yourself, including everybody else, because so many people I work with, they don't want to hurt other people's feelings. Now, I don't want you to hurt other people's feelings either. But as Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School says, like if someone's going to be disappointed, it shouldn't be you. I say if someone's feelings are going to be hurt, it shouldn't be you. And there's a difference between hurting someone and harming them. So it might hurt you to use a needle to take a splinter out, but it's not going to harm you. It's going to heal you. It might hurt someone's feelings to set a boundary with them, but it's not going to harm them. And it might heal your relationship with them because you're being honest with them about what's okay and what's not okay, like coming clean with them about who you are. But even if it doesn't heal your relationship with them, it heals your relationship with yourself, because you're showing up for yourself, you're following through for yourself, you're having your own back in ways you probably never have before. So on top of the emotional healing, there's this reliance on self, like being able to trust yourself. And when you can trust yourself, you're so much more likely to love yourself. So I have clients who, the one that's popping in mind right now. So last summer, before she started coaching with me, she went on this particular vacation. Her husband, who she is now divorcing from, is an active alcoholic, and she went without him with some friends of the family and was completely stressed out the entire time because of all the drama with the husband. And she just went a few weeks ago again with the same family. And she's like, Barb, I'm in a new life because I have boundaries with my soon-to-be ex-husband. I'm not trying to manage his stuff. I'm not trying to change him into being someone that he's not. She blocks him for short periods of time so that she can have some peace. In the past, it didn't even occur to her that she could do that, never mind being capable of doing that. And she's focused on herself and what she wants. And I would say that's another huge benefit, is that one of my mantras, Kevin, is keep the focus on yourself, keep the focus on yourself, keep the focus on yourself. And this doesn't mean become a selfish person. It means let's focus internally. What do you want out of your life? And guess what? You're in charge of making that happen. And the only way you're going to make that happen is if you keep that front and center. So the way I do that is the first thing my clients do before we even start working together is I take them through this exercise, determine their top 5 values, and then they use those values as sort of like guideposts or guardrails for how to make decisions in their lives, for where and when to set boundaries. And so they become more focused in so many ways, but especially upon themselves and what matters to them. So those are some of the outcomes.
And I'm sure through the deep work as well, like these women, they probably recognize their needs, their unmet needs a lot of times in these relationships too. And I'm sure that's really big. Okay.
Well, it's
So you
not
have
just
to talk.
recognizing them, it's actually feeling like they deserve to to have their needs met. And they learn how to ask for them from the right people. That was an issue for me too. I
Yeah.
made myself unnecessarily vulnerable to the wrong people. And then I got stung, and then I thought, oh, I can't ask for help. Well, now I know who to ask for help from.
Yeah, it's like asking, have you ever seen those like cats on like Instagram or like YouTube? Some of them are just like so like cattish, right? They just do
Yeah.
their own thing half the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And it's like asking them to be a dog. And I'm like, kind
Yeah.
of, you
Right.
can't really
Right.
get that need
Yeah.
from them. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a saying we
Okay.
have similar to that in 12-step recovery, and it's don't go to the hardware store for milk. And so what's happening with a lot of my clients is they're going to the hardware store for milk. They're going to their emotionally unavailable partners for emotional support. They're going to their completely unreliable and inconsistent adult children for reliability and consistency. And so a large part of the work I do with them is also getting their expectations in alignment with reality. Like, it is perfectly reasonable, for example, to expect that in the professional world, your boss would follow through and do what they say they're going to do and be a person of their word. But if you've had a boss for 17 years, like I did, who has never been reliable in any way, shape, or form, it may be a reasonable expectation in the professional world. But for that woman, that was an unrealistic expectation of mine. And I had to be taught that through the process of 12-step recovery. Stop going to the hardware store for milk.
Which leads me to this next question, because so much of your work is like the inner work, right? And it's kind of hard to put numbers on it. And so, like, one of the things that I noticed a lot of coaches struggle with on this, like, listening to this, is like pricing and pricing strategies. And of course, you don't need to give any hard numbers, but
I'm happy to. I think it's helpful for people to hear them. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, how do you structure your pricing for your offers and all that?
So my pricing for my 12-week program started at 1,800 and it's now 3,800. But I did that in a stepwise. I went from 1,800 to 2,000, from 2,000 to 2,400, and from 2,400 to 3,800. And that was because a coach pushed me. And the way she did it was she said, I think you should be charging 4,800. And I was like, I can't do that. And I personally, I was taught this from my first coach, and this really serves me. How does it feel in my body? So when she said 4,800, I was like my nervous system couldn't tolerate that. And she kind of backed down. And when we got to 3,800, I was like, that feels really good to me, because I am helping people transform their lives, their relationships with themselves, their relationships in the workplace, their relationships with family, friends, neighbors, everything, for the rest of their lives. If somebody said to you, I could change you instantaneously and it would cost you $3,800, most people would say yes, right? So I feel really good about that price. But
Yeah,
I
I'm
had
kind
to
of
I
curious.
had to work up to feeling worthy of that.
And I'm curious on your initial pricing of 1,800. How did you get that initial number, I guess?
Because I had learned when I worked at Yale, like, consulting was approximately $150 an hour. Just, I don't even remember where I got that number. So 12 times 150 is 1,800. So it was, because in my mind, I was in the beginning, I thought I was getting paid hourly by the people, right?
Yeah.
For the hour that I met with them. And now I understand I'm not paid for my time. I'm paid for the transformation that I give them.
Yeah.
Right. But that took me years to be able to understand. This is not about my time, because if you're paying me for my time, you're paying me for my 30 years of professional expertise and the time that I went through 12-step recovery, and that I developed my curriculum, and, the things that I learned through everything in my personal development journey, which has been since I was 14 years old.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I see this pattern with a lot of coaches. When they first start off, they base it off an hourly model. And then as they get more advanced, or maybe more experience is the correct word, they start doing more value-based pricing and all that. So it's really interesting to hear your journey about that. Thank you again so much for that transparency too.
Yeah.
Now,
And I also
I
want to
want
say, I've been told, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've been
to go
told
ahead.
by people in the coaching world that I'm actually on the low end. Still hard for me to internalize that. As time goes on, I know my price will go up, but right now, 3,800 feels really good to me.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to ask, for the women professionals that you work with, where are they in their career? Are they like C-suite? Are they executives? Are they more middle management? Where do they kind of fall?
So I would say it's middle management and higher. So I've worked with some super powerful women. I worked with a woman who was in the C-suite at one of the oil companies. I've worked with an international model. I've worked with a Hollywood producer. I worked with someone who was on the board of USA Today. I've worked with someone who was a foreign correspondent. But I would say they're typically older. I have worked with a few younger women, but I'm 62 myself. And so I tend to work with women like in their 50s, 60s. And I have worked with a few women that are in their 70s as well. And most of them are still working. Some of them are retired, but they want to like let go of the patterns they had when they were in the workplace.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because I was just wondering, like, a lot of times your pricing is dictated by kind of like who you serve as well. So thank you for giving the extra context.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do want to switch over to kind of your future goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been in the game for about 7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And so where do you want this coaching business to take you in the next few years? Do you have any secret dreams, big ambitions
Yeah.
no one knows about? I'd
Yeah,
love to hear
so I have actually started saying this out loud. This is probably the first time I've said it on a podcast, but the word empire comes to me all the time. It feels like a higher power thing. And I'm always like, are you sure, God? Yeah, empire. So I'm building a coaching empire. I don't know precisely what that means, but I have some ideas about what that means. And, I'm really interested. Like, what I would like is for 8 billion people on this planet to have healthy boundaries and to focus on themselves, not to the exclusion of other people, but so that they can pour from the overflow rather than an empty cup and give from a place of abundance rather than a place of lack. I'm interested in a world where women are in leadership positions more than 50% of places. I really feel like men have had their time. I'm sorry, but men have had their time, and we know that when women are in positions of leaderships, things do better on so many different markers. And I think that, women are much more relationship oriented and community oriented. And I think we need more of that in this world. I am interested in having corporate training. So I would love to create trainings that I license to corporations, especially because I just worked with people in the field of law. I learned that there's a major crisis with attorneys. There's a huge substance use and mental health problem in that profession. And so if I could if I could help train young attorneys from the beginning of their career, that they do not have to work 80, 90, 100 hours. And if they choose to do it, then they need to be invested in that and stop complaining and then set up their lives accordingly. And then, of course, all of the helping professions, healthcare, social work, therapists, all kinds of people, teachers. I would love to be providing trainings for people like that, especially earlier in their career, but also when they're later in their career, because you don't have to wait. It's never too late to change. One of my first private coaching clients was a teacher who was I think she was in her mid 50s, and I coached her over the summer. And when she went back to school in the fall, she was like, Barb, my first day back, I knew I was a different person. I didn't end the day completely drained. And she realized that it was because she was not taking responsibility for other people's emotions. And she was taking responsibility only for her own. And she was being very direct and clear with people what she wanted and what she needed and what was okay and not okay, and standing firm in that. So she's well into her career. I do want to help people at the beginning of their career, but it doesn't mean I don't want to help people later in their career. They're my peers.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it doesn't take away from the feeling that we deal with the repercussions of not setting proper boundaries or the deeper work as well. So I'm glad that you mentioned that it's never too late. One thing I did want to touch upon, you did say the word empire.
Yes.
And so as you're thinking about the word empire, what kind of challenges, bottlenecks, things that you're noticing as you're kind of headed toward this empire vision right now?
So to be frank, my main bottleneck is my nervous system. I've actually just made the decision in the last week that I'm going to take on a part-time job again. So I've had part-time jobs until a year and a half ago, and it was just time for me to leave the last one. And now I'm like, I really feel better when I have a steady, predictable income from a part-time job on top of the fact that I live alone and I work at home. So being around other people, ideally in person, but if not, just regularly on Zoom. And I am around people on Zoom, of course, every day coaching, but it's not the same as being part of a team. And there's something about the interaction with other humans that really calms my nervous system. And so I would say that's my main bottleneck, is that everybody is much more creative and can come up with innovative ideas when their nervous system is regulated. And before I got into recovery, Kevin, I didn't even know anything about my nervous system. I didn't understand my nervous system was jacked up 24/7 because of the trauma and the intergenerational dysfunction.
Yeah, I think I can really relate to that. And it's kind of like when you've been in survival state for so long, when your sympathetic nervous system has been kicking up for decades, you kind of don't have a feeling of what's normal again, quote, air quotes, normal, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Okay. Barb, I'd like to play a game with you if you're open for it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's called First, Last, Best, Worst.
Okay.
And so one of the things that a lot of coaches do is that they make investments, right? Business investments. And so I'm curious, what was the first business investment that you ever made?
A business coach. But I met him through networking, and he was like a 70-year-old guy who had come from the world of manufacturing. So he knew business, but he didn't know anything about coaching, and he knew nothing about online businesses. So he helped me until he couldn't help me anymore.
How long ago was that into your
That was
business
in the
career?
very beginning in 2018.
Okay. The last business investment that you made.
That was a huge coaching program, like a very big, extravagant coaching program that I end up having to pause because I couldn't continue to make the payments. I wasn't earning what I thought I would earn as a result of the coaching program.
I see. Interesting. The best business investment you ever made.
In myself, my own personal development. So one thing I haven't said is, I told you I got into recovery for codependence. I then very quickly learned that I was an adult child from a dysfunctional family. And so my main program is called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, which is a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. The last 2.5 years, so I've been in recovery for 10 years, the last 2.5 years, I have dove into this journey of reparenting, which if people aren't familiar, it's all done like in your imagination. But I have these inner children and inner loving parents, and I do this work every single day. And it is hands down the best work I have ever done. So like learning how to build healthy boundaries. How could I be a coach if I didn't do that? Learning how to have realistic expectations, come out of victim mentality, like all the stuff I did in recovery, and the reparenting is hands down the best investment. Because if I'm not stable and growing, how can my business be stable and growing?
Okay. And then last question, the worst business investment that you made that you kind of want your money back from.
It was a coach. It was a coach that I loved and I followed and I participated in their group stuff. I spoke to other private clients. I really, really thought this is it. And though I got stuff from it, I did not get my money's worth. And I remember after the fact realizing what I wanted from her was basically to do an audit and look at my whole suite of everything I offer and say, get rid of this, move this here, bring on this. But I didn't tell her that. And then I was doing some networking with some women entrepreneurs that I know well. And one of them and I had just happened to have a conversation that she essentially did a business model audit. That is what I wanted, which she called a website audit for free because we're friends. And she gave me everything I wanted. And when I was telling her and the group of people after that this other coach didn't give me what I wanted, but I didn't tell her, she said, yeah, but you didn't tell me what you wanted. And I was able to give it to you because I knew what you needed. That was a huge light bulb for me. So for a while, I was taking the blame for not getting what I wanted from that coach. And now I'm like, she's been in the game for a very long time. I shouldn't have had to tell her what I needed.
As you're sharing these investments stories with me, I'm very curious, how has your decision-making process changed over the years in what you decide to invest in?
I need some kind of experiential proof. So for example, I never used to want to do bartering with people because I want to be paid for my business, my expertise, and I want other people to be paid for that too. And I'm actually now bartering with two people because they have what I want and I have what they want. So that woman that did that audit for me, I'm boundaries coaching her and she's business coaching me. She's starting to call herself like a business strategist. That's essentially what she is. And she's like, I'm just creative. I'm like, no, you're brilliant. And then I have another person who is an internal family system therapist who does her internal family systems work with me, and I do my boundaries work with her. And this is because I've gotten a sampling of how they think and what they do. Now, that being said, I felt like I did that with the other coaches. I felt like I vetted them, but I just, I'm not sure what to say about that. I was 100% in with all of the people when I invested in
Yeah.
them.
Maybe it's because I'm a combat sports guy. And so I'm like
Okay.
into MMA and stuff like that. But
Okay.
it's kind of like we all go in with the plan of never
Uh-huh.
getting punched in the face. But
Mm.
sometimes when you're in the
Sometimes you get
arena,
punched in the face. And I
you get punched.
I say this, but I don't really have regrets because I look at
Mm.
it like this has been tuition for me. This is
Yeah.
coaching school tuition that I have paid.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Like, what comes to mind is Layla Hormozy and Alex Hormozy, and they have this concept of the ignorance tax and stuff like that too, and
Oh,
how we
that's a
have to
good
pay
one.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's a really great analogy. Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
final advice. Let's say if you had to start over tomorrow, zero followers, zero clients, none of the relational capital that you built up over these 7 years, but you have all the wisdom that you have right now. What would
Mhm.
your first 90 days kind of look like to rebuild this coaching business?
I would build some kind of transformational program. And then I would start with private coaching. I tried to start with group coaching when I became a boundaries coach anyway. I didn't understand. You need to like prove yourself as an individual coach and get like earn your chops, so to speak, but also attract enough people so that you have to start doing group coaching. And so I would absolutely start with creating something transformational and do one-on-one coaching and keep a job for a while, which I did. I mean, I did that for the first 5.5 years of my business.
Yeah, that's really great advice. It's really interesting, especially the part that you said where you started off with group coaching versus
Mhm.
like in the beginning and how you change that these days.
Right. Right. And I did that because in my mind, I could have greater impact in terms of numbers. I knew that, but I didn't understand. I wasn't ready to make the deep transformation as a new coach that I got to be now, but also doing the one-on-one stuff. You're deep
Mm,
into one person. You get to see like deeper patterns and stuff. So I was
mhm.
thinking I'm going to have a greater transformation or a greater impact in terms of numbers. I wasn't thinking of depth. And then I also thought, oh, I'll be able to earn more money that way. And not if you don't have
Mm,
clients, you won't.
great point.
Yeah.
Barb, final question. How can people find you? How can people connect with you?
So, a couple ways. One, obviously, if you're listening to a podcast, you like to listen to podcasts. You can hop on over to Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you think you'd like to work with me, I do a free 30-minute Unshakable You call. You can go to barbchat.net. And then we talked about like what's draining you. I have a quiz on like what's draining your boundaries, and you can go to higherpowercc.com/drain to take that quiz, and it will help you understand like what's my pattern. Am I an overgiver? Am I a controller? Am I a pretender, etc.? And then it gives you some pointers on like where you can go and what you can do to help with that pattern. Personally, I was all of those things.
Well, Barb, it was so great just speaking to you. I think, what I think like a lot of times things like boundaries and all that is kind of overlooked a lot of times. And it's probably one of the most important things because
Absolutely.
people, like especially in business, I
Hmm.
mean, there's things like scope creep, there's like things like
Yes.
negotiation, like there's
Mhm.
a lot of things that
Right.
all
Absolutely.
stem from boundaries.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
coached a lot of women entrepreneurs and they suck at boundaries. So it's things like you said, scope creep, not delegating, not charging what they're worth, feeling like they have to do everything themselves, neglecting themselves, not getting rid of toxic clients, employees, and vendors, all that stuff.
Because just to finish this thought, because a lot of the tactical stuff comes pretty easy, but like recognizing the initial work of recognizing like not knowing our boundaries or not knowing how to enforce our boundaries, all this deeper work is often neglected. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming onto the
Oh,
podcast and
thank
speaking
you.
about this.
Great questions, almost none of which I've ever been asked before. So this was a thrill.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Barb. Hopefully we'll have you again on the podcast.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love that. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.